Ethan Cole had never expected his Tuesday evening to end like this. One moment he was walking through the quiet corridors of the orbital station, holding a small invitation he had thought was for a friendly dinner. The next he was staring into a vast hall filled with lights that shimmered in colors he had never seen, and beings whose forms defied every logic of anatomy he had learned on Earth. He paused, unsure if he had stumbled into a dream or a hallucination. Towers of glowing crystal rose from the floor like trees made of light, and a hum of energy seemed to vibrate through the air. Beings of all shapes, some with wings, others with translucent skin, and some whose very bodies seemed to float, moved elegantly among the guests. The smell of unfamiliar flowers and something warm and metallic filled his senses. "Welcome, honored guest," a voice boomed, echoing like music. Ethan turned to see a figure approaching, tall and regal with robes that shimmered like liquid gold. Before he could answer, a group of attendants grabbed him by the arms, lifting him gently but firmly toward a platform at the center of the hall. "What is happening?" Ethan whispered, panic rising in his chest. He tried to pull away, but the beings holding him were impossibly strong, yet careful not to hurt him. A crowd had formed, and all eyes, hundreds, maybe thousands, were fixed on him. Whispers traveled like waves, and Ethan realized with horror that their tone was celebratory. They were not horrified at his appearance. They were expecting him. From the opposite side of the hall, a figure emerged. She moved like water, graceful and commanding at the same time. Her skin shimmered faintly, a soft silver-blue glow, and her eyes were deep pools of amber that seemed to see through him. Long strands of hair, iridescent and flowing like liquid light, framed a face both beautiful and fierce. She wore ceremonial robes that glimmered with what looked like starlight, and as she walked toward him, Ethan felt an almost magnetic pull. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He wanted to say he was sorry, that this was a mistake, that he belonged on Earth, not in some alien wedding hall floating in orbit. But before he could speak, the figure reached the platform, and the attendants placed him in a central spot opposite her. A deep, resonant voice sounded from above, speaking in a language Ethan did not understand. Yet somehow he felt the meaning without hearing the words. The crowd erupted in cheers. They were celebrating him. As the noise washed over him, Ethan's mind raced. "I am not the groom. I'm not supposed to be here. I need to leave. I need to escape." But the hall seemed to tighten around him. The attendant's grip did not loosen. The lights pulsed in rhythm with his racing heart. The bride's amber eyes met his, and for a brief moment he thought he saw something like confusion flicker there. Then almost imperceptibly she nodded, as if acknowledging that he was an unwilling participant but also the only option. Ethan tried again to protest. I think there's been a mistake," he stammered, his voice trembling. The crowd fell silent and all eyes turned to him. The stillness was more terrifying than the noise had been. He felt exposed, tiny in the vastness of the hall. Then the bride raised a hand and a soft wave of energy seemed to roll over the platform. The crowd resumed their murmurs, now with something like expectation, not anger. The attendants released him, but he remained rooted in place. It was clear that moving away was not an option. In that moment, Ethan realized that walking out of this wedding could have consequences far beyond embarrassment. The eyes of 1,000 alien beings were on him. One wrong move and he might trigger outrage or worse. He swallowed hard and looked at the bride again. She was calm, poised, and entirely in control. Despite the chaos around him, she radiated a sense of authority that Ethan found almost hypnotic. "I have to play along," he thought. "At least for now." A voice echoed in his mind then, soft and melodic, almost like a whisper carried on the wind. "Do not resist. It is too late to turn back." Ethan jumped, looking around wildly, but no one else seemed to hear it. The words had come from her. Somehow he understood them perfectly. His mind raced. How had he ended up here? How could he possibly survive this? And yet beneath the fear there was a spark of curiosity. Who was this alien bride? What was the culture of these beings who could turn a human stumble into a moment of ceremony and celebration? As the first ceremonial lights aligned above the platform, bathing them in radiant colors, Ethan realized there was no escape for now. He was trapped. Not by force alone, but by the weight of expectation, honor, and the silent promise of something he did not yet understand. Somehow he had stepped into a story far larger than himself. A story where he was no longer just Ethan Cole from Earth. He was the human who had accidentally walked into an alien wedding. and the world, indeed the galaxy, was watching. Ethan's heart pounded as he stood opposite the alien bride. Her gaze seemed to reach into his very mind, and he could feel the warmth of intelligence radiating from her. She moved with a grace that was almost hypnotic, her every gesture precise and fluid. Yet despite her elegance, there was a tension in the way she held herself, a hint of hesitation beneath the surface. The crowd waited, silent now, their thousands of eyes fixed on him and the bride. Ethan swallowed hard, trying to imagine what he could possibly do. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words felt useless in the face of this spectacle. Instead, he simply bowed awkwardly, hoping to show respect without offending her. The bride's lips curved into a faint smile, barely perceptible, yet it carried a strange reassurance. She stepped closer, and Ethan noticed the intricate markings on her robes. They glimmered faintly, almost as if alive, tracing patterns that seemed to move like flowing water. She carried herself like a queen, yet there was something fragile about the way she looked at him. "You are human," she said in a voice that vibrated softly in his mind. It was not spoken aloud, yet he understood every word perfectly. "Yes," he thought, startled. "How are you speaking in my head?" "It is our way," she answered, as if reading his thoughts. "Do not be afraid." Ethan could hardly believe it. He had seen movies about aliens, read books, but never imagined something like this. He wanted to ask questions, to run, to scream, but the crowd's expectant silence pressed down on him. He realized then that resistance was not an option. He had to play the part, at least for now. The bride tilted her head slightly, observing him. "You are unsure," she said. Again, the words filled his mind, soft yet firm. "You did not choose this, but your presence is required. For honor, for peace, for our people." Ethan swallowed. Peace, our people? He had no idea what she meant, but somehow he felt that backing out was not merely dangerous. It could cause real harm. He had stumbled into a ritual far beyond his understanding. The attendants began to move around the platform, placing objects in a circle between them. Ethan noticed the objects shimmered, each one radiating soft light. The bride gestured to them, and one floated toward him. It hovered in the air, glowing like liquid crystal. "This is part of the ritual," she whispered in his mind. "It binds us together, not just in ceremony, but in thought and purpose." Ethan stared at the crystal, his pulse quickening. "Binds us together? In thought?" The word sent shivers down his spine. He had always thought of human marriage as symbolic, emotional, sometimes legal. Never had he imagined it could involve something this literal, this intense. He glanced at her again. Her amber eyes held a quiet intensity that made his stomach twist. She was not cruel nor playful. She was serious, commanding, but not unkind. She seemed to be offering him a choice, though he knew deep down there was no real choice at all. The energy in the hall, the thousands of witnesses, the ritual itself, it would not allow him to leave. "Will you participate?" she asked, the words echoing in his mind again. He hesitated. Fear gnawed at him, but so did curiosity. The idea of linking his mind to hers terrified him, but a part of him wanted to understand. What would it feel like? He nodded slowly, more to himself than to anyone else. The attendants lifted the crystal, guiding it to float between them. Light spilled from it, bathing their faces in a soft glow. Ethan felt warmth radiate through his chest, as if the crystal were alive, responding to his heartbeat. The bride extended her hand, and without thinking, he took it. The moment their fingers touched, a wave of energy surged through him, blinding and strange, like stepping into sunlight after years in darkness. He gasped, stumbling slightly, but she held him steady. Voices whispered in his mind, her thoughts, her feelings, images of her people and her homeworld. He saw her planet, cities that floated among clouds, oceans that shimmered with unknown colors, and beings who moved with elegance and intelligence he had never imagined. And through it all, he felt her hope and her fear, her honor and her duty. When the wave passed, Ethan stood trembling, his mind buzzing. The crowd cheered, their voices a living wall of sound, but he hardly noticed. He looked at the bride, her expression unreadable but calm. Somehow, despite the strangeness, a connection had formed between them, an invisible bond that linked his mind to hers. I understand," he whispered, unsure whether he spoke aloud or in his mind. Her smile was gentle now, almost human. "Then we begin," she said softly. "Do not worry. You are not alone." Ethan realized then that this was only the start. He had survived the first moment. But countless challenges lay ahead. The bond was real, unbreakable, and strange. It would not only define the ceremony but his very existence among these beings. As the lights of the hall pulsed around them, Ethan felt a mix of fear and awe. Somehow he had become part of a story far bigger than himself, and somewhere in the back of his mind a thought rose unbidden. Perhaps he was meant to be here after all. The ceremony began in earnest, and Ethan felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on him. The hall shimmered with floating lights, their colors shifting as if alive, reflecting the energy of the crowd and the ritual. He looked at the bride, Princess Serenia, and noticed that she seemed calm now, though her eyes carried an intensity he could not yet comprehend. "Focus," her voice whispered in his mind. The words were soft but commanding. Ethan nodded, unsure how to respond. He could feel her thoughts brushing against his consciousness like ripples on water. Her memories, her expectations, her anxieties. It was overwhelming and strangely intimate. The attendants began placing more objects around the platform. Crystals, orbs, and metallic structures hovered in perfect symmetry. Each one pulsed as if sensing the bond that had already begun to form between Ethan and Serenia. He could feel the energy rising, warm and prickling, filling the space between them. Serenia raised her hand, and a crystal floated toward Ethan. He hesitated, but the moment his fingers brushed it, a wave of energy surged through him. This time it was deeper, more intense. He felt a connection not just to her mind, but to her emotions, her pride, her fear, her hope. Panic rose, but he forced himself to breathe. Somehow he had to endure this. Somehow he had to survive. The psychic link was strange, disorienting. He saw flashes of her memories, an ocean that glowed under twin moons, cities that floated above the clouds, the faces of her people smiling and crying in turns. He could feel her thoughts and intentions mixing with his own, and the sensation was intoxicating and frightening all at once. "This is the bond," Serenia said in his mind, her words anchoring him. "It is our connection, our promise. It cannot be broken lightly. It will last as long as we live and beyond if necessary. You must accept it to survive." Ethan's mind spun. Survive? He had not realized this was more than a ceremony, that stepping into this ritual could tie him to her in ways that were permanent. His instincts screamed at him to resist, to pull away, but he understood that any refusal now could cause chaos, possibly even violence. The crowd waited. The ritual demanded completion. He nodded slowly, his heart hammering. "I accept," he said aloud, though his voice trembled. He did not know if it was enough, but it was all he could offer. Serenia smiled faintly. Her hand brushed his again, and the energy intensified. This time it was not just flashes of her world he saw, it was understanding. He understood her sense of duty, the weight she carried as a princess, the fear of dishonoring her people. And she understood him, his fear, his confusion, his simple desire to survive and somehow do the right thing. The bond pulled him closer to her mind, yet paradoxically, it gave him clarity. He could feel the rhythm of her thoughts, the pattern of her emotions. Each pulse of the ceremony resonated through both of them, intertwining them in a way that was undeniable. He was no longer a mere spectator. He was part of the ritual, part of her life, whether he wanted to be or not. The attendants completed their placements, and the final crystal floated between them. It glowed with a bright, almost blinding light. Ethan felt the warmth spreading through his chest and out to his limbs, and he realized that he was connected not just to Serenia, but to the ritual itself. The energy pulsed in sync with his heartbeat, and he could feel the expectations of the crowd pressing against him, hopes, fears, and admiration all merging into one. Serenia's hand rested on his shoulder. "Do not be afraid," she said softly. The thought was not merely a suggestion. It carried weight, a command wrapped in reassurance. Ethan found himself drawing strength from her presence. Somehow the connection that had terrified him moments ago now offered comfort. Then a hush fell over the hall. The energy around them seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. Ethan looked at Serenia and saw a subtle change in her eyes, anticipation, relief, and something he could not yet name. The bond was complete. The psychic link had settled into place, solid and unbreakable. Ethan's body trembled, but his mind felt sharper, more aware. He could sense Serenia's focus, her calm determination, and he realized that despite the fear, he could meet this challenge. The bond was not merely a prison, it was a lifeline, a bridge to understanding her world and surviving in it. The crowd erupted once more, cheering and humming in resonance with the final pulse of the ritual. Ethan felt the warmth of their collective energy, a wave of acceptance washing over him. For the first time since he had stumbled into this alien wedding, he felt a small spark of confidence. He looked at Serenia, and for a brief moment, their eyes met in understanding. They were bound together, whether by accident or by design, and neither could turn back. Ethan knew that the coming days would challenge him in ways he could not yet imagine, but he also understood that he was not alone. He was tied to her, and through that connection he could face whatever this strange and dazzling world might throw at him. As the lights of the hall pulsed gently around them, Ethan took a deep breath. He was no longer just a human lost in an alien ceremony. He was part of something far bigger, and whether he liked it or not, his life and perhaps the future of his species was now intertwined with the alien bride. Ethan had survived the ceremony, but the real challenge had just begun. The grand hall emptied slowly, leaving him and Princess Serenia at the center. He could feel the psychic bond still humming between them, subtle but undeniable. It was as if their thoughts and emotions were now entwined, a connection deeper than anything he had ever known. As they walked toward the private chambers, Ethan noticed the glances from the Zathari court. Their expressions were sharp, cold, and judgmental. They whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads, others narrowing their eyes. It became clear that not everyone was pleased with a human groom. Many seemed to question whether he was worthy of standing beside the princess, let alone sharing the bond they had just witnessed. Serenia did not notice the whispers. Her eyes remained focused on him, her expression unreadable yet confident. "They will test you," she said softly, her words filling his mind again. "Some do not accept outsiders, especially humans." Ethan swallowed hard. He had always thought humans were clever and adaptable, but facing a court of alien nobles, some towering over him twice his height, and adorned with markings he could barely understand, made him feel small. "How do I survive their tests?" he asked, the words trembling in his mind. "You observe," she replied. "You adapt. You show them what humans can do." They entered a wide chamber lined with floating platforms and banners that glimmered in the alien light. The court gathered, forming a semicircle around them. The elders of the Zathari, beings with long, flowing limbs and eyes that seemed to glow with ancient wisdom, stared at Ethan. Their gaze was piercing, and he felt as though they were examining his soul. "Welcome, human," a tall elder said, his voice echoing like a drumbeat. "You have been bound to Princess Serenia. You stand before us now, and we shall see if your kind is capable of honor and strength worthy of our people." Ethan nodded, trying to appear confident. Inside, his heart was hammering. The first test came immediately. The elder pointed to a floating device, shaped like a geometric puzzle. "Solve this or demonstrate understanding of its function. Only then shall you be acknowledged as worthy to stand beside the princess." Ethan approached the device cautiously. Its surfaces shifted and glowed, changing shape as he touched it. He could feel the energy within, almost as if it were alive, reacting to his movements. He had no idea what the correct solution was, but he remembered something Serenia had shown him, a pattern in her thoughts during the ritual. He mimicked the rhythm he had seen in the crystal's light, turning shapes and aligning edges. Slowly the device responded, settling into a perfect form. A murmur ran through the court. Some nodded in approval, others frowned. The elder's eyes narrowed but softened slightly. "You observe. You adapt. This is good," he said. Encouraged by the small victory, Ethan continued to follow the tests. He was asked to recite alien sequences, to solve puzzles that required logic unlike anything he had learned on Earth, and to demonstrate physical agility. Each time the bond with Serenia guided him subtly. He could sense her confidence, her pride, and her expectations. Sometimes it was a whisper in his mind, sometimes a feeling he could not define, but it kept him steady. Not all of the court was convinced, however. Some of the nobles whispered amongst themselves, plotting and criticizing. Ethan could feel the tension, the thin line between approval and rejection. He realized that being human here was not just about survival. It was about proving that humanity had value in a universe far beyond Earth. During a brief pause, Ethan turned to Serenia. "Do they really hate me?" he asked softly, unsure if he wanted the answer. They fear change, she replied. They fear what they do not understand. But you have something they do not. Creativity, determination, and heart. Show them that, and they why. They'll follow, Ethan nodded. It was strange knowing that she believed in him more than he believed in himself. The bond pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat in sync with his own. Somehow that connection made him feel braver, more capable. The final test of the day was a demonstration of leadership. Ethan was asked to direct a group of young Zathari in a simple task, organizing floating objects in a precise formation. He hesitated at first, unsure how to communicate without words they could understand. But then he remembered human gestures, simple commands, and the intuitive guidance from Serenia. The formation came together perfectly, elegant and precise, and the crowd erupted in murmurs of approval. By the end of the day, Ethan was exhausted, physically and mentally, but something had changed. The court no longer saw only a human outsider. They saw someone who had adapted, who had learned quickly, and who could hold his own beside Princess Serenia. As they walked back to the private chambers, she reached out and lightly touched his arm. "You are learning," she said, "and that is what will keep you alive here. More than strength or skill, it is your mind that matters." Ethan felt a mix of relief and awe. He had survived the court, at least for now. But he knew this was only the beginning. Being accepted as her consort would require more than courage. It would demand that he prove, day after day, that humanity could stand proud among the stars. And as he looked at Serenia, glowing softly in the alien light, he realized he was ready to try. Ethan had barely begun to feel a sense of belonging when the station trembled violently. Lights flickered and a low, rumbling sound reverberated through the corridors. Alarms blared, echoing like distant thunder. The court was thrown into chaos. Ethan's heart leapt into his throat as he saw the panicked faces of the Zathari around him. Serenia moved with astonishing speed, her grace unbroken despite the sudden attack. She shouted orders in her mind, reaching through the bond to calm him and guide him. "Stay close. Do not panic. Follow my lead." The words were both command and reassurance. Ethan followed her instinctively, dodging debris as a section of the ceiling crumbled. He had no training, no knowledge of alien combat or station security, yet somehow his human reflexes kept him alive. He ducked behind a hovering column, catching his breath, and looked at the crowd. Shadows moved with precision and deadly intent. Assassins had infiltrated the station. They were fast, their forms fluid and strange, blending almost seamlessly with the shimmering lights of the hall. The Zathari guards engaged them, but there were too many. Ethan felt the psychic pull of Serenia, her urgency and fear, and without thinking, he leapt forward to intervene. One assassin lunged at her from above, a blade-like weapon in hand. Ethan grabbed a decorative staff from the platform and swung, knocking the attacker off balance. The Zathari guards glanced at him in surprise, but Serenia's focus never wavered. She moved like liquid, dodging strikes, countering attacks with lethal precision. Ethan realized she was saving him even as he tried to save her. The bond between them pulsed strongly now. He could sense her thoughts as clearly as his own. She needed him alive, needed him to act, and his fear began to turn into a strange, new determination. He ducked and rolled, using his instincts to anticipate the assassin's movements. Humans were not as strong or fast as Zathari, but they were unpredictable, and that unpredictability became his advantage. He spotted a control panel glowing faintly on the wall. Remembering a lesson from earlier tests, he used it to trigger a defensive mechanism, a burst of energy that knocked several attackers off their feet. The crowd gasped. Some began murmuring, astonished that a human could react so effectively. Ethan felt a surge of confidence. He was not helpless. He could make a difference. Serenia met his eyes, and in that moment he understood the depth of her trust. She had seen him adapt before, but now he was fighting beside her in a life-or-death moment. He did not know if he was brave or just lucky, but he had to try. Another wave of attackers came faster and more aggressive. Ethan ducked behind a floating platform, grabbed a heavy crystal and hurled it with all his strength. It struck one of the assassins squarely, sending them sprawling. The Zathari guards rallied, inspired by his actions. Together with Serenia, they began to drive the attackers back. Ethan noticed small details, patterns in their movements, and used them to anticipate strikes. Each time he succeeded, the bond pulsed warmly, a silent acknowledgement from Serenia. He was learning, adapting, surviving. Finally, the last of the assassins retreated, slipping through the corridors as the station regained calm. Silence settled over the hall, broken only by the hum of lights and distant alarms. Ethan's chest heaved with exhaustion, but there was a strange exhilaration in the mix. He had survived, and somehow he had helped. Serenia approached him, her expression unreadable yet softening slightly. She placed her hand on his shoulder, the bond thrumming gently. "You were brave, unexpected but brave." Ethan smiled weakly, still trying to catch his breath. "I was just trying to survive," he thought. She understood. "And you did more than that." The court, who had watched in astonishment, now looked at him differently. Some whispered in admiration, others with disbelief, but the tone had changed. Ethan realized he was no longer just a human outsider. He had earned a measure of respect through his quick thinking, his courage, and the way he had adapted to the chaos. Serenia led him to a quieter chamber, away from the crowd. "You see now," she said in his mind, "why we must be careful. There are those who do not want this bond, who do not want our worlds united. But there are also those who will learn to accept you, if you show them what you are capable of." Ethan nodded, feeling a mix of pride and apprehension. He had faced danger and survived. But he knew this was only a taste of the challenges ahead. The bond with Serenia pulsed gently, reminding him that he was not alone, that together they could face threats that seemed impossible. As they looked out over the hall, Ethan realized something profound. He had entered this wedding by accident, terrified and confused, but now he understood a truth he could not ignore. Humans had a place in the stars, even if it was unexpected, even if it required courage, quick thinking, and adaptability far beyond what he had ever imagined. And for the first time, he began to see Serenia not just as a distant, regal figure, but as someone who believed in him, trusted him, and had given him a chance to prove that humanity was more than mere survival. It could shine, even among the stars. The trial of the stars was unlike anything Ethan had ever imagined. It was held in a massive chamber high above the orbital city, where the walls shimmered with constellations, and the floor seemed to float in empty space. The Zathari called it a test of courage, skill, and intelligence. It was meant for their best warriors, not a human who had stumbled into a wedding by accident. Ethan felt the weight of the psychic bond with Serenia as they stood together on the starting platform. Her calm focus radiated into his mind, steadying him. "Do not fear. You have come this far. Adapt, observe, survive." Her confidence gave him a strange strength, though his heart still pounded with anxiety. The trial began with a test of agility. Floating platforms shifted in complex patterns above the void. Ethan was expected to jump, dodge, and move without hesitation. The first step was terrifying. One misstep meant falling into nothingness. He felt the bond pulse guiding him, sending subtle cues of rhythm and timing. He leapt, caught his balance, and began to trust his instincts. Serenia's presence beside him was constant, a quiet reassurance he could feel even without seeing her. Every movement of hers was mirrored slightly in his mind, a rhythm of grace and precision. He realized that despite the danger, he was learning to move in sync with her, almost as if they were one. Next came the test of intelligence. Holographic patterns and alien symbols appeared, shifting constantly in a dizzying display. He was asked to solve puzzles, unlock doors, and navigate pathways that changed in real time. Humans were not known for thinking in alien logic, but Ethan relied on observation and creativity. Where the Zathari expected brute skill, he used imagination, spotting connections and patterns they had overlooked. The bond pulsed again, this time with a warmth that felt like pride. Serenia's thoughts encouraged him, offering hints without giving answers. He understood then that the trial was not merely about physical or mental skill. It was about trust, adaptation, and courage. And he was proving that humans, though fragile in form, could match the alien mind in unexpected ways. The third challenge was the test of bravery. A section of the chamber opened into a vast, empty space filled with floating energy orbs. They radiated power and danger, and Ethan could sense the fear of falling or being struck. One by one, he stepped forward, guided by the subtle pulses of Serenia's mind. His heart raced, but each step he took strengthened his confidence. The bond reminded him he was not alone, that he could survive if he trusted both himself and her guidance. As he advanced, he noticed subtle movements, shapes shifting in the shadows. They were illusions, but they tested his focus and calm. Each time he hesitated, the psychic bond nudged him forward, grounding him. Step by step he overcame the illusions, reaching the final platform. There the final challenge awaited, a duel of strategy and reflex. A holographic warrior, representing the finest of Zathari combatants, materialized. Ethan's body tensed. He had no training in alien martial arts, no experience in these precise movements. Yet he remembered what Serenia had taught him, not to mimic strength, but to anticipate and adapt. He moved, dodged, and reacted instinctively. The hologram attacked with fluid motions, but Ethan's unpredictability became his strength. Where the warrior expected rigid response, he responded with human intuition, improvising and turning defense into subtle offense. Every move was guided slightly by Serenia's mind, a quiet rhythm he could feel pulsing through him. The duel ended with the hologram dissipating into sparkling light. Ethan stood breathless and felt the bond vibrate with triumph. He had survived the trial of the stars, not through superior strength or alien skill, but through adaptability, courage, and trust. The chamber erupted with applause, the voices of the Zathari echoing in celebration. Ethan looked at Serenia, her eyes glowing with pride and warmth. "You have done well," she thought, and he felt the depth of her admiration in a way words could never convey. For the first time, Ethan realized the truth of the bond. It was not a prison or a chain. It was a bridge. It allowed them to share strength, to teach, to guide, and to face challenges together. He had entered this alien world as an outsider, unsure and fearful, yet he had emerged as someone capable of standing beside a princess, facing trials that would have defeated many of her own people. As they returned to the station above, Ethan felt a new confidence. The court would now see him differently, though there would still be challenges. But he knew he had proven something important. Humans were not weak, not fragile, and not unworthy. Through courage, intelligence, and trust, he could face any challenge. And Serenia walked beside him, her presence a steady pulse in his mind. Together they had crossed a threshold, one that would not only define their bond but perhaps reshape the way the Zathari viewed humanity. Ethan smiled faintly, exhausted but exhilarated. The trial had ended, but the story was far from over. Ethan had faced the unexpected, survived assassins, and completed the trial of the stars. Yet as he and Serenia returned to the central hall, he sensed the air was different, heavier, as if the station itself was holding its breath. The court was gathered again, their expressions tense. Whispers filled the space, though Ethan could no longer tell which were of suspicion and which of awe. Something was about to happen. Serenia stepped forward, radiant and poised. She raised her hand and the psychic bond pulsed gently in Ethan's mind. "Prepare yourself. The truth will be revealed." This is more than ceremony. An elder, one of the oldest and wisest of the Zathari, floated forward. His voice echoed, low and commanding, and Ethan felt its weight even without understanding the words directly. Serenia translated the meaning in his mind. "The invitation you received, human, was no accident. Some among us wish to test whether humans could bond with Zathari. The results will decide the future of this alliance." Ethan's mind reeled. Every fear, every moment of confusion over the wedding now made sense. He had thought it was chance. Now he realized it had been a test, and he had passed not through deception or luck, but through courage, adaptability, and trust. The elder's gaze swept over him, sharp and probing. Ethan felt the court waiting, their judgment heavy. But then something extraordinary happened. Serenia placed her hand on his, and the bond pulsed warmly. "You have proven yourself. Not because you are Zathari, not because you are powerful, but because you are human. That is your strength." Ethan felt a swell of pride. It was strange to be valued for something he had never considered extraordinary. But in this alien world it mattered. He had adapted, survived, and shown qualities that even the most seasoned Zathari respected. The crowd erupted in a mixture of cheer and awe. Many who had doubted him now looked at him with respect, some even with admiration. The whispers of disbelief transformed into murmurs of approval. The test was complete, and the human who had stumbled into a wedding had emerged as a figure of promise. Serenia stepped closer, her amber eyes meeting his. The bond between them strengthened, and for the first time Ethan felt truly connected to another being in a way he could not have imagined. The psychic link allowed him to feel her pride, her relief, and an unspoken affection. It was not love yet, but it was a bridge toward understanding, toward partnership. Human, she said softly in his mind. You could have fled. You could have resisted. But you chose to trust, to act, to survive. That is why you stand beside me now. That is why this bond is real. Ethan nodded, the weight of the words sinking in. He realized that he was no longer just an accidental participant in a wedding. He had become a symbol, proof that humanity could rise to meet challenges even in the vastness of the stars. Then Serenia raised her hand, addressing the court. Her voice carried not only authority but warmth and certainty. The elders listened, and slowly, the tension in the room eased. Ethan could sense their approval solidifying, the remaining doubts fading. He understood that this moment was not merely ceremonial, it was transformative. Humans had been given a place in Zathari eyes, and he had forged that place through courage and integrity. The elder stepped forward once more, bowing slightly. You have shown wisdom beyond expectation, human, he said. You honor our princess and our people. You have earned your place beside her, not as a guest, not as an outsider, but as an equal. Let the bond be celebrated and honored for all time. Ethan felt the weight of relief and accomplishment. He had entered the wedding by mistake, terrified and unprepared. But now he stood as a symbol of human resilience and potential. The bond with Serenia pulsed warmly, a reminder that he was no longer alone in this strange and dazzling world. The crowd erupted in cheer and celebration. Beings of all forms glided toward them, offering gestures of approval and honor. Ethan looked at Serenia, her face glowing with pride and something softer now, trust and admiration. He realized that through all the fear, confusion, and danger, he had discovered something extraordinary, a connection that transcended worlds, built not on accident but on courage, adaptability, and understanding. Serenia's hand rested lightly on his. We begin a new chapter together, she thought. Ethan felt the bond resonate with her words. The station, the court, the trials, all of it had led to this moment. He was not just surviving. He was part of something larger, something that could shape the future of humans and Zathari alike. For the first time, Ethan smiled without hesitation. He had gone to an alien wedding by accident, faced danger, completed impossible trials, and survived. But more than that, he had proven that humanity could rise to meet the stars, not as weak outsiders but as equals, adaptable, clever, and brave. And beside him, Serenia smiled too. The bond between them strong and unbreakable. Together they would face whatever challenges awaited, as partners, as equals, and as the living proof that a human could belong among the stars. The celebration continued around them, but Ethan no longer felt lost. He had found his place, not by accident but by courage, trust, and the extraordinary human spirit that had brought him to this moment.